Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's ASE webinar. Hopefully you're able to hear my audio good. My name is Dave Capper. We'll do our introductions here momentarily. And John, over to you. Again, welcome everyone. I see you're still filtering in for tonight's ASE webinar. This is the second of our webinar series, which seem to have caught on, are very popular. And we're thrilled to bring this to you tonight. As the panelists tonight, we have John Tisdale, who's the Executive Director of Test Development Operations. We have Don Dew, who's the Executive Director of Special Projects and is going to be helping me co-moderate tonight. And yours truly is Dave Capper. I will be also moderating tonight's event. And with that, we'd like to just go over a little bit of housekeeping in terms of the controls that you see in front of you. Just to make it clear to everyone, I want to make sure that you know that sometimes the communications on this are boilerplate and they're going to say you need a headset and a microphone. That's not true. Your main means of communicating with us here at ASE is through your questions window. Again, Don and I will be moderating your questions. We may answer them right away, or we may group those questions and use them later in the presentation depending on what the questions look like. So just ask you to be patient enough where we can't always answer every question right away, or we may again defer it to another point in the whole webinar. Your control panel is over on the right, so you can see where the question box there is circled and where you can enter your information. So again, your audio on your end is going to be disabled. Hopefully you're able to hear us okay on your end. And then we also want to just talk about, John, if you'll go to the next slide, please. Just want to talk about mobile devices. In our initial survey of the registration for this webinar, we found that there were quite a few of you that were interested in attending this on an iPad, an Android tablet, iPhone, Android phone, whatever it is. And one of the things that took us by surprise in our last session was that the full functionality is not yet in these apps as far as being able to attend a webinar, or maybe at least interact fully through the webinar. So what we've learned is, as you can see here, so on Apple iOS devices, you can communicate via chat with us, and that means you can submit your questions, but you cannot respond to polling questions. And if you don't have the app, you'd have to get it at the Apple App Store. You'll probably be prompted for that automatically if you're trying to work on that device. Okay, on Android, you cannot communicate via chat, and you cannot respond to polling questions either. So your mains there of attending the webinar on Android device would be your audio and listening to what goes on in this session. We do have in good confidence though that these apps are getting updated real soon, and they will bring the full functionality that you'll have on a desktop. So again, back to the Android app, if you wanted to download that, you go to the Google Play Store, which used to be known as the Android market. Okay. With that, John, I think we want to start out with a polling question. So again, everyone, we can monitor what's going on with this polling question. We just want to get an idea of what the audience looks like tonight in terms of being certified or not. And again, if you're on one of those mobile devices, you're just unfortunately not going to be able to be accounted for in this poll because there's no way we can get your input and feed it in back on this end at this time. Okay, it looks like I'm going to end the poll right about there because we're not able to get 100% because of the mobile devices that we're seeing out there, and we'll take a look at this later, but we'll go ahead and close it out and share the results with you here. So as you can see, it looks like we've got about 72% of you and 28% no. So we've got a nice balance of the audience here. Of course, ASE has changed a lot with our computer-based testing and some other things related to it. So a lot of things you may have known about the program in the past have changed with that implementation. But with that, at this point, I'm going to switch over to John Tisdale. John is the gentleman here who's going to be able to help you out with ASE test questions, which is what you encounter when you take an ASE test. There's a lot to know about evaluating those questions. So again, John, over to you.
Well, thank you, Dave, and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us here for our, as Dave said, our second featured webinar here. We delivered the first one in late December. That was on test preparation and getting yourself ready for ASE testing. So I built this webinar. All the content that I've put into these first couple of webinars really comes from you folks, our technician customers that communicate with us about things that are good and bad with what we're doing as an organization, providing you professional credential. So a lot of the information that I put into these comes from questions that I hear out in industry events that I'm at, whether I'm at a trade show or I get incoming phone calls, emails, and so forth from technicians that that communicate with us about different things, as I mentioned. So, really kind of one of the main points to this presentation answers a prevailing question that I hear all the time, and that is, how does answering test questions prove anything about my hands-on ability as a technician? Kind of an intriguing question when you think about that, because we do things in the shop physically, and how does answering test questions have any parallel to that? My answer to that question is ASE test questions convey in words what you do in the shop. Our questions are structured around scenarios, diagnostic and repair scenarios that we're testing a specific skill, and we're going to get into that in detail here. But I want to draw a parallel here to illustrate a point that I'm going to support throughout this presentation to you tonight. And that is, reading and understanding the information in a test question is critical. It's critical to arriving at the correct answer to that test question. I don't think anybody would argue with me on that point, right? Well, the parallel I want to draw is, this is the exact same skill that we technicians apply when we have to read and understand service information in order to help us make an accurate diagnosis of the vehicles that we're repairing in the shop. Okay, so this reading and understanding information is critical to us more so today than ever. We're having to read and interpret a lot of service information. So my objective here is to show you how ASE test questions are structured and give you some insight into how to evaluate them, just like we know how we have to evaluate service information. Hopefully the information that I'm going to give you will help you to apply your technical knowledge and make an accurate diagnosis of the situations identified in the test questions you're going to see in the ASE certification tests. So if I can accomplish that tonight, we're doing really well. Let's take a look at an overview of exactly what we're going to go over tonight. Okay, the first thing we're going to talk about, I want to give you a little background into where the questions in the test come from. Who writes the questions, and how does ASE ensure there's only one right answer? Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to give you an introduction to the different ASE test question styles. We have specific styles of questions that we use in our tests to maintain consistency in the display of information. So we're going to talk about ASE test question styles. The real meat of the presentation is, once we understand the styles, is how to analyze the information that we provide in a test question to help you to understand exactly what we're testing you on in that question, and how to analyze that information in order to arrive at an answer to that question, which really, in that scenario, is a diagnosis to an automotive problem, just like we'd be doing hands-on in the shop. So we'll show you how that one-to-one parallel works with the hands-on world that we live every day in the shop. Then I'm going to get into a little bit of tips for test taking. I'd be remiss not to just tell you what to experience, what you're going to experience on test day, and some tips for how to have yourselves better prepared for that. And as Dave mentioned, we will have some structured question breaks all along. The chat window is open, so Don and Dave will be answering your questions on the fly as we go along as I give this presentation. So don't hesitate to chat with them, and they'll do the best they can to answer your questions. So without further ado, let's get started on the content. Let's start with test question development. ASE test questions are developed in what we call workshops. They're test development meetings. Every ASE test that we offer for certification, whether it's an automobile test, medium heavy truck test, collision repair test, we update those tests about every 3 years. Okay, we want to make sure that the content of those tests stays current with today's technology. The people that people that come in to write these questions for us are representatives, technical representatives across a varying demographic of technical folks in the service and repair industry. We'll have manufacturers, representatives from their technical training departments. We'll have technicians themselves, technical trainers, some leading technical trainers. So we want to get a good cross-section of demographics of where people come from, but also the influence that they have. Somebody from Ford, GM, Chrysler, Nissan, Toyota, Honda, Mazda, because ASE test questions have to apply to the masses, not just one manufacturer's way of doing things. The questions that are written and used in the ASE test, they're written by the subject matter experts that come to ASE and participate in these development meetings, okay? Not ASE staff like myself. What's staggering, we put together about a 15-member panel that come to review and write questions for us. The cumulative level of experience in one of these groups averages somewhere between 300 and 500 years of experience. So there's a lot of power in the room that helps us to sort through the various activities that we go through, particularly when we're vetting questions for being written clearly, concisely, only having one right answer. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. What I want you to understand is that the questions that are written by these SMEs in these workshop groups, the ones that are written by them and reviewed, have to meet the consensus of the entire workshop group in order for ASE to ever consider using those in a future ASE exam. And we'll talk a little bit about validation in a minute, because we don't just stop there. We don't take their word for it saying, hey, this is a good question, ASE, go use it and make a pass-fail decision. We'll talk about validation in a minute. What I want you to understand, though, there's no product-specific questions used in ASE tests. Again, we try to cross-section the demographics, so the technology that we address breaks it down to basically the science or the basis of what that skill is assessing, regardless of what type of vehicle you're working on. Voltage drop works the same in everybody's vehicle, okay? So, we'll test you on voltage drop. I don't care if you're working on a European car or American car. It works the same way. But there's no product-specific questions. Now, when we go through these test development meetings, what we have our subject matter experts through debate is to make sure that the incorrect options are technically qualified. Based on the situation in the question, and we've got some example questions that we're going to use to develop how to analyze those questions clearly in a moment. But the point I want to make right now for you to understand now is that the incorrect options, there has to be a sound, fundamental, technical reason why that option is incorrect based on the situation we created in the question, okay? Just like the correct option, the answer to the question, the diagnosis that we're making that's accurate to the information in the question, that also has to be technically qualified based on sound, fundamental, technical reasons of the situation in the question. Only one right answer. In the ASE world, there's no best answer. There's no no ambiguity. There's one answer that is clearly right based on technical reasons. There's 3 options that are wrong based on technical reasons. Okay, and you're going to see a little bit of the science behind how we do that when we look at how to analyze questions. Now, validation. As I mentioned, our SMEs write these questions, but we don't just stop and say, hey, these guys have said this thing's great. These questions are great, ASE, go use them in the next test and make a pass-fail decision for a technician trying to earn certification. We won't do that. What we do is we embed them in a future ASE exam. These are some of those extra questions I've heard technicians gripe about that, hey, why am I having to answer those 10 extra questions? they don't do anything for me. Well, those questions are embedded in the exams. They're not considered in scoring, okay? We don't give you extra credit for answering them, and we don't take points away if you don't, or if you miss the correct answer. Because what we're really trying to do is we're performance testing those questions for accuracy. We're actually cross-checking the job that our SMEs did when they wrote that question and said, hey, we've got a clearly written question with one right answer and 3 wrong answers, and these are the reasons why the right answer is right and the wrong answer is wrong. We're cross-checking and making sure through statistical indices that we receive from the information you provide us by answering those questions that tell us that yes, this question should passes muster, and we can use this or consider using this question on a future test to make a pass-fail decision. If some of those questions don't meet the strict requirements that we require, we'll simply set them aside and take them back to a future workshop group and say, hey, the last group thought this question was good, but when we gave it to a national sample of technicians, statistics came back not so good. What's wrong? What's broken? Something's broken with this question, and we'll have those folks help us fix those. Okay, so only the best questions survive and are the ones that are ever used to make a pass-fail decision for you, our technician customer, trying to earn a credential from ASE in whatever area it is that you're trying to earn questions or earn your certification. Sorry. So now what I want again, we're going to lead up here to actually evaluating some test questions, but I want to give you a little bit of the science behind evaluating questions first, so then we can apply that to actual questions, and I can show you how you can use these tools to evaluate the information in questions to help you answer questions correctly, applying your technical knowledge of the skill. So the first thing we want to do when we see a test question is we want to read each question for context. Okay? Now you might, John, what does context mean? Context simply is understand what is being asked. Okay? What's the whole scenario? Okay? Remember, ASE questions convey in words what you do in the shop. So understanding the scenario in a written question is critical to your evaluation of the content. You're doing things in the shop, but you're reading in a test question. So you want to get into the situation. Okay? Is it a diagnostic or a repair procedure? Are we doing a root cause analysis versus performing a repair? Like diagnosing the cause of low fuel pressure versus torquing lug nuts, okay? What's the situation? What's the context of the situation, okay? You want to analyze all the answer options briefly just to get a concept of what context your options are given to you in. Like I said, this is looking at it in context. It allows you to put yourself in the situation. Okay, just like you would be in the shop, it puts you in the situation, the diagnostic situation. Then what you want to do, you want to read each question for content. Now, of course, you're doing all these things, expeditiously, because in the new computer-based testing world, you're on a clock, more so than you were in the pencil and paper days. But you want to understand the context, then read the question for the content. And in doing so, we're going to analyze the key information that is given to us in the question, okay, and in all the answer options. Okay, in the question, it might be the symptoms that the vehicle is exhibiting that the customer is complaining about, or test information or test results that have been performed for you. Test results that you would have done yourself, but we're giving you the results information to the tests that were performed for you to analyze. Okay, so you want to look at the key information in the question and in all the answer options, because the answer options are going to be very specific to the situation. If it's an electrical question, we're going to be talking about opened, shorted, stuck open, stuck closed. Okay, you need to look at common denominator type failures versus a single case failure, and we'll talk about that in one of the question examples. So keep that in the back of your mind, because some interesting information I'm going to give you there. The most important thing is take the information in the question for face value. Don't read into the question. I know you've probably heard this hundreds of times from other technicians and from trainers that you've seen, teachers in school. You don't want to read into the test question. ASE test questions, they identify a concise diagnostic or repair scenario. All you need to do is apply your technical knowledge of the subject using the information provided in the question. Okay, you don't want to induce any information that isn't provided for you already, by the content of that question. Okay, so we're going to get into some question styles here. Before we shift gears and identify question styles, do we have any questions about any of this content so far?
Yeah, John, here's one I'm going to pass on to you. It seems to be a common thread tonight, and that is in terms of the extra questions that are on a test for statistical research purposes. We're getting some comments that, why should they be on a test? Because they take extra time. So if you could talk about that for a moment.
Well, we need, very good question, and that's one I obviously answer a lot. We need the sample of a national sample of technicians, people that are doing the job with varying degrees of ability. We need all of those folks to answer the question in order to give us the correct statistical indices that tell us whether or not that question is clearly written, concisely written, and only has one right answer. Now, the test times that we have, that we've developed for the computer-based testing, take into account that there's 10 additional questions. So we have done time studies to arrive at the time allotments that are given for taking a battery of questions, and those times have been applied accordingly. So, for example, one 50-question test like the automatic transmission test, you get for certification test, there's 50 scored questions and 10 extra questions, 60 questions, and you get 60 minutes, okay, on the clock. The electronic systems test, again, 50 scored questions, 10 extra pre-test questions, okay, that don't count for score. You get 75 minutes. The reason being is the time study said, well, the electrical tests are usually more schematic intensive. They take a little extra time, so we have to add additional time to those tests in order to give technicians enough time to answer the questions without rushing. That's the big thing, and we're continuing to monitor that test by test to make certain that people aren't being rushed. Of course, that doesn't work for 100%, but I'm happy to say that so far our time studies for our first complete year in 2012 of computer-based testing show about an 85% proficiency for our test candidates answering questions without being rushed. So that's a pretty high correlation. 15% still huge, and we're continuing to look into it to see if there's improvements we can make down the road. But we have to start somewhere. Anything else, Dave?
That's pretty much it for now, John. Let's go ahead and move on.
You there?
Yep, that's pretty much it for now, John, so let's go ahead and move on.
Okay, very good. Okay, well let's talk about ASE question styles, okay? Still a little bit more background before we actually get into evaluating some sample questions, okay? The interesting thing to understand about ASE question styles are written to actually parallel work situations, okay? We want to have we want to have typical diagnostic scenarios, but we want them to parallel actual work situations in the shop, okay? Scenarios that are real world, okay? We also want them to parallel the thought process that's used by technicians. We don't want technicians in our written testing environment to think in any different way than we think in the shop when we're fixing cars, because it has to be a one-to-one. Remember, written testing versus hands-on, got to be as close to a one-to-one parallel as we can draw, okay? So let me share this with you. Most people out in the world, they deal with cause and effect, okay? If I do this, then this happens. Well, we technicians, we actually work in the reverse, okay? We work with effect and cause relationships. That's what we do, okay? We get symptoms and diagnostic information, and our job for our customer is to determine the cause of the problem and fix their car, right? So effect and cause is our world. So that's why, our test questions are written in the same vein that we give you a diagnostic scenario with symptoms and diagnostic information, which of these could be the cause, and we give you 4 options, and you're drawing a conclusion and making a diagnosis. So, the effect, That's the symptoms and the test results information that we give you. The cause is the diagnosis or the answer to the question. Okay? You just have to determine which cause is correct for that situation. Okay? So just an important point of distinction to make, because there's a lot of insight that goes into the way that questions are structured. If they're structured correctly, again, as you can see, it just follows our thought process. Okay? Another stylistic thing I want you to understand, ASE questions, if you've ever taken a test, which of these is the most likely cause? Which of these could be the cause? Usually the last statement in our test question. Okay? What I want you to understand is which of these is not meant to be, we don't use could and most likely to be ambiguous, okay? We ask you which of these could be the cause. Well, as we know, in a diagnostic scenario, many things can cause the same symptom, okay? A misfire, if we're going for a misfire, we could have a fouled spark plug, an open plug wire, a burned valve, all kinds of things could cause the symptom of a misfire. But in an ASE question, we ask you which of these, okay? Because of these, there's going to be one thing that will cause it and three that won't, and we're testing your knowledge of those situations to see if you understand the difference and which of those could be the cause, okay? So just want you to understand the distinction. Most likely and could is not meant to be ambiguous. It's there's no, to the extent there's no absolutes, but we make it absolute by the fact that there's 3 wrong answers, okay? But it's of these, and those are the ones we're offering you for evaluation. Okay. The other thing to understand is that ASE test questions are written based on typical diagnostic scenarios. When we bring our SMEs together for question writing, I don't want them to write those questions that only the best technician in the United States could fix this car. Okay. Only one in a million. I don't want the 1 in a million type problems. We want diagnostic scenarios that are typical to the everyday life of a technician working in the shop, that's critical to evaluating their competency in performing that skill, whether it's brakes diagnosis, engine performance, engine repair, brakes, what have you. Okay, so we want typical diagnostic scenarios. Okay, so now to do that, we use 4 basic question styles, okay? And this is where we're going to actually look at some sample questions and break them down and learn how to evaluate the information in the questions and analyze test questions based on the information we're providing for you, okay? The first question style that I'm going to show you is what we call the completion style. The completion style is simply sentence structure. The last sentence ends in a colon, okay? The answer just completes the statement, okay? Now let me give you an example of a question, okay? This question reads, a right rear tire on a vehicle with independent rear suspension has wear on the inside edge of the tread. This can be caused by excessive, okay? So we end in a colon there, all right? The important thing, the first thing that we want to do, we want to look at the context of this question, right? We're going to go back to the stuff I was talking about earlier in this presentation now, okay? We want to look at the context of this question. What's the context of this question? Well, we're diagnosing the inside edge wear, inside edge tire wear on one tire, okay? And really quick, my context of the options is, hey, I'm dealing with alignment angles, okay? I'm dealing with alignment-related issues, okay? So that's the context. I need to do it that quick, okay? Because remember, we're on the clock in the test center, right? So we want to look at the context really quickly. And I'll show you how we can do this quickly, but I'm not going to rush too much, okay? So now we want to look at this question for content, okay? We want to look for key information, okay? In the setup of the question, okay? The key information we want to look for, we're dealing with a car with independent rear suspension, okay? Key information to this situation, okay? Again, inside edge wear of the tread. Inside edge wear is key, all right? And we're dealing with, this could be caused by excessive. The last word we give you is excessive, and it's excessive as it relates to all the options. Excessive toe in, excessive positive camber, excessive thrust angle, excessive negative camber, okay? So now that you've extracted the key information out of that, now you want to kind of analyze the options, okay? Well, if I had excessive toe in and excessive positive camber, the rear wheels won't wear on the inside edge of the tire, okay? So I can automatically throw those 2 options out, okay? An incorrect thrust angle may cause the steering wheel to be off center, not generally going to cause you to have inside edge wear on the tire, okay? You have excessive negative camber, that will wear just the inside edge of the tire tread, okay? Now this is why was independent rear suspension critical to this? Because we're talking about rear tire wear, okay? We've got adjustable camber and independent rear suspension. So that was critical to the situation that we've created in this question, okay? I think that everybody will agree here, this question is testing our knowledge of alignment settings and if they're incorrect, how they affect the vehicle, particularly in this case as it relates to tire wear. And we need to know the difference, in this case, in the observed tire wear between excessive positive and excessive negative camber, right? Negative camber is going to wear the inside edge, positive is going to wear the outside. Do we understand that? That's what this question is testing us for. Do we understand that? It's critical to us being able to make tire diagnosis. So, okay, and so all in a nutshell, that's the completion style and a little bit of insight into evaluating question content, okay? Context and content. We're going to go through a few more here, okay? The direct style. Again, it's just a stylistic consideration for the structure of the question. A direct style question, it ends with a question mark. The completion ends with a colon, okay? So we just end it with a question mark. The options just answer the question, okay? So my sample question here says, a vehicle with disc drum brakes has one brake rotor that is overheating. Which of these could be the cause? So we have to very quickly ask ourselves, what's the context of this question? Okay, we're diagnosing one brake rotor for overheating. Okay, and the options deal with system conditions and failed brake components. Okay, so very quickly I've analyze the context, okay? I've put myself in that situation, right? Now what I want to do is I want to look at this question for content, okay? I want to look for that key information. Remember, I want to look for that key information in the setup of the question, okay? The vehicle has disc drum brakes, okay? It has disc drum brakes, key information. One brake rotor is affected, okay? I've got a single wheel problem and it's overheating, okay? So now that I've looked at that, I look at my options and I've got overfilled fluid reservoir, leaking brake booster, leaking wheel cylinder, or collapsed brake hose. If I have an overfilled brake hydraulic system, it may cause all the brakes to overheat. Okay? Remember what I said earlier about analyzing the options based on a single component failure as it relates to an option that's given for a common denominator problem? Okay, I got one brake rotor overheating, and I've given you an option of a common denominator problem, which would be an overfilled fluid reservoir. Okay, take a look at those. That's key to evaluating information in a question. Typically, a common denominator problem isn't going to, if we're dealing with a single situation, a common denominator cause isn't going to be your answer. Okay, a brake booster leaking, that might cause a hard brake pedal, but again, more of a common denominator type problem. Leaking wheel cylinder, loss of pressure, okay, not increasing the applied pressure, okay, but the collapsed brake hose may retain the fluid pressure at the caliper, won't allow the caliper to retract back, and so therefore it stays applied and gives you an overheated rotor. So in this case, our collapsed brake hose is the correct answer. The correct answer is D. Okay, so once you've narrowed it down to two options, think about the technical information given in the question and think about, how to apply that to the options. A leaking wheel cylinder equals the loss of pressure. Collapsed brake hose could cause, the caliper to be stuck on. So, if you narrowed it down to, hey, I've got two common denominator conditions that I know are a toss-out, but I'm not really sure between that leaking wheel cylinder and collapsed brake hose, then apply your technical knowledge and say, which one's going to cause that thing to stay applied, okay? So, again, this question, it's testing our knowledge of braking system operation with a single wheel malfunction, and it's testing whether or not we understand, the conditions that could result in this situation. Particularly as it relates to system problems versus single component problems. Okay, so that's the direct style question. All right. Now, let's move over to the next question, the infamous Technician A, Technician B. A lot of conversation that I have with technicians about these, and I hope I turn a lot of light bulbs on tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because I'm going to tell you something that you're just going to have an aha moment if you don't understand this question style. Okay? This is the most misunderstood, as I've already touched on. Really, what we have two independent true-false statements. Okay? We have two technicians making independent true-false statements about a common problem. Okay? And what's important to understand is, you don't need information in Technician A's statement to answer Technician B's, and vice versa. Okay? Technician B is standalone from Technician A. Two independent guys making a statement about what they think the diagnosis is, and you analyze their statement based on true or false. Okay? Cover the other one up. Don't even think about what they're saying. The situation versus Technician A, true or false. The situation versus Technician B, true or false. And then you arrive at your answer. Let's look at how we do this. Okay? We're going to look at the context of this question first. The technician is measuring starter amperage draw. The reading observed on the meter is above specifications. Okay? My context is, hey, I'm doing a starter current draw test, right? Okay? And Technician A and Technician B are making their assertions, their diagnoses of, what could be the cause of high current draw during the starter current draw test, right? So, let's take a look at that key information, okay? I'm going to bring this up full screen so we can look at it again. All right? The reading that we've measured is above specifications, okay? That's in the setup of the question. The current draw is above specs, okay? That's key. Technician A says that low engine compression could be the cause. Well, his key information is low compression, okay? That's the key information. Technician B says that low resistance between the positive battery post and the cable clamp could be the cause, okay? And we've got low electrical resistance, key information to the situation, okay? Now, when you look at this, you have to analyze apply your technical knowledge to a starter current draw test and say, okay, what do I know about engine compression as it relates to this test? Okay, low engine compression. Well, if you understand this technology, you're going to know that low engine compression causes less mechanical resistance during the engine cranking process. Okay, got lower compression, less pressure, so therefore it's less resistance. Okay, that won't increase starter draw. Okay, the current draw. All right, so Technician A's statement is false. Remember, the way I'm reading this question, technician is measuring starter amperage draw. The reading observed on the meter is above specifications. Technician A says that low engine compression could be the cause. True or false? Okay, Technician A's statement is false. Now forget about what he said and read Technician B. Technician B says that low resistance between the positive battery post and the cable clamp could be the cause. True or false? Well, as we know, low resistance is a desired characteristic of all good electrical connections. Okay, so Technician B's statement is also false. Technician A and Technician B questions always use the same organization of answer options. Who is right? It's always A is A only, B is B only, C is both A and B are correct, and D is neither A or B are correct. So in this case, they're both wrong. They both made a false statement. The correct answer to this question is D. Okay? Again, if we had, let's go back. Let's backpedal a minute, okay? If we had a high engine compression, okay, that might cause a higher drag and could increase current draw. So, we could have gone a bunch of different directions, but again, it's kind of like the which of these could be the cause, okay? Of these, we've given you low engine compression and low electrical resistance to evaluate here, and we're testing your knowledge of whether you understand how those are going to affect current draw, okay? And that's really the crux of what this question is trying to draw out from us, is whether we understand Ohm's law in making our diagnosis of good versus bad circuit integrity, and understand engine mechanical conditions as it relates to making this type of a diagnosis as well. So, but again, the structure of the Technician A, Technician B question, I hope I turned a lot of lights on, because in the true ASE world, This is the way we structure these questions. I'm not going to pick on any of the good folks out there in the publishing world that build ASE test prep guides that have sample questions, but sometimes they don't write these in the correct format that they're purely written in our question writing sessions and the way you're going to see them on our tests. As long as you stick with what I've told you tonight, 2 independent true-false statements made about a common diagnosis, you're going to be on the right track every time with these. So I hope I really turned on a lot of light bulbs with that tonight, because that's one of the best kept secrets, and that's what we're so happy about these webinars, because we want to spread this good information to you folks and help you not have ASE test questions be reading tests, but be a true measurement of your skills hands-on, okay? Because that's the goal here. Okay, we have another style question. These are a little bit different now. This is what we call the accept style, okay? This forces us to shift gears a little bit, okay? From all the other question styles we've just looked at, the accept style wants us to look for the option that could not cause the condition. Okay, could not cause the condition. You might ask me, well, John, what value is that in trying to determine what wouldn't cause it? Well, you know, if you've ever poured through any symptom or diagnostic charts, they always tell us about a bunch of things that will cause the problem, okay? And we might be looking for the one thing that won't cause it, okay? So that's kind of what this question does, is that, you know, symptom charts really kind of give us this information. 3 things that will cause it, 1 that won't. So you get yourself a little bit twisted up with these because, again, it causes you to shift gears. So these questions, we actually start them with a statement that says, you know, this question is not like the ones before. You know, choose the option that will not cause the conditions. So we shift gears for you and make a statement at the beginning of that question to get your mind in the right framework to answer this type of question. So at that point, you're ready to use the process of elimination to analyze the question. So let's look at our example. Technician observes white smoke or vapor coming from a vehicle's exhaust. This could be caused by all the following except. So we have a bunch of options there: cracked cylinder head, a leaking water pump, leaking head gasket. You know, we got some failed components there, and then a normal condition. It could be a normal condition, maybe, is one of the options, okay? So the context of this question we want to quickly analyze is we're diagnosing white exhaust smoke, okay, and we're looking for what won't cause it, okay? We're looking for what won't cause it. So let's shift gears now and look at this question for content. Again, look at it for content, okay? The key information, as I mentioned, we're looking at white exhaust smoke, okay? And our key information in our options, we have a cracked cylinder head, we have a leaking water pump, we have a leaking head gasket, and normal operation, okay? Well, so now we have to apply. We're looking 3 things that will, 1 that won't. Okay, so again, we have to apply our knowledge of the subject matter in this question and use our technical knowledge to make our diagnosis of this problem. So coolant, I think everybody knows, coolant from a cracked head or a leaking head gasket into the combustion chamber should show up as white smoke coming out of the exhaust. Okay, water vapor. Water vapor is really, it's a natural byproduct of the combustion process, particularly as it relates to catalytic converter vehicles equipped with catalytic converter. Everybody that understands gas analysis knows that a converter helps to convert CO into CO2 and hydrocarbons into water. And so that water vapor is a natural byproduct of the combustion process. So some steam and vapor may be noticed out of the tailpipe, especially in cold weather and during startup. Good point of distinction. It'll usually burn off. Any accumulated water vapor in the exhaust system will burn off after the exhaust system heats up and evaporates it. But that's what we say. But it could, could be normal startup operation. However, a leaking water pump shouldn't allow coolant in the exhaust system. So that's the answer we're looking for. We're looking for, the one that won't cause it. In this case, the leaking water pump, and the option there is B. Okay. So again, this question is, again, it's testing our knowledge of engine failures, that can result in abnormal color smoke, to emit from the exhaust, okay? We could have spun this question a couple of different ways. We could have asked about black smoke or blue smoke, okay? Looking for, maybe a rich air fuel condition, or blue smoke, burning oil. So a lot of different spins we can do on the same theme, okay? And then come up with different answers to that question. So, but again, it's the idea of extracting that key information and understanding how it applies to the content of the question and what we're trying to test from you. Okay. Now, the most interesting and most popular style question that we use are the illustrated style questions, okay? Illustrated, we use an image. The image is used to help us to analyze the question, okay? Most of our illustrated questions use a line art type drawing. Very good for depicting all types of things in our world, particularly electrical schematics, okay? With the advent of moving to computer-based testing, we're having the opportunity to introduce color images, okay? So you don't be surprised if you pop open an ASE test and all of a sudden you see a color picture on the screen, okay? A couple of things I want to point out about color. It's going to be kind of window dressing, okay? You're not going to see like red wires on the feed side and black wires on the ground side of a circuit. We will never use color as a basis for answering a question. It would be unfair to do so. We have to think about what about folks that are colorblind, and we ask them, diagnose the green wire, okay? You may not be able to see the green wire. All right, so there's going to be a little window dressing, going to break up, the monotony of just, the old black and white world of testing, and hopefully shed a little, real world color on some of the situations we're doing. But it's more for show than anything. Okay. The important thing about the illustrated questions, all the question styles that I've shown you, the 4 styles that I've shown you previously, we can use illustrations with any of these questions. So you could see a Technician A, Technician B style question with an illustration, or completion, direct, and accept. We'll use it with any of the 4 style questions, okay, interchangeably. We like to use the illustrations because they help level the playing field. As you know, there's some situations where it's very tough. Remember I told you we don't have product-specific questions? Well, sometimes the technology that we address in the automotive diagnostic world is difficult to address without getting specific. Different manufacturers do things different ways. Some might use normally open switches where some use normally closed. So, but all the subject matter experts that write our questions agree, you know what, our manufacturer doesn't do it that way, but if you give my guy an illustration, I expect him to be able to diagnose it. Okay, so that's where we can give you a generic representation of of an electrical circuit, or anything what have you, and it may be similar to one manufacturer's way of doing it, but what, it's electricity follows Ohm's law. So again, if it's normally open switch, normally closed switch, really doesn't matter when you're making electrical measurements and drawing conclusions. It works the same way. Okay, so the illustration is going to help level the playing field and help us address a situation that maybe we couldn't have addressed without a picture. Okay, so that's one of the beauties of the illustrated questions. Let's look at an example of one. Okay, so we've got an electrical question. Okay, and in this situation we've got a fuel pump. We're doing a fuel pump in the vehicle. Illustrated is inoperative. It's not working. When the technician connects a DMM as shown, 4.93 volts is measured during cranking. When battery voltage is applied to the prime connector, the fuel pump runs normally. Which of these could be the cause? And we have 4 options there, okay? So what's the context of this question? Again, we want to very quickly assess the context of the question. I'm doing an electrical diagnosis for an inoperative fuel pump. My options offer me failures at points in the electrical circuit, okay? So that's the context of the question. Now, I want to put the whole thing on the screen where we can see it with more room, and let's get into the content, okay? Again, what's the key information? We've got a DMM reading, taken engine cranking, but the pump works when we bypass battery voltage to the fuel pump prime connector, okay? Now, the key information in the options, we have opens, and we have high resistance, so we need to understand the effect of an open circuit or high resistance on a circuit, okay? So if you look at the remediation, the fuel pump runs when voltage is applied to the fuel pump prime connector, okay? If that's the case, if you know anything about electrical, there can't be an open at W or high resistance at Y, Okay, the electricity's got to flow through that prime connector to the pump and down to ground at W. Okay, so if we had either of those two conditions, it wouldn't work with a bypass of B plus to the prime connector, right? There's voltage when the vehicle's cranking. Okay, we are getting some voltage through the feed side, so there isn't any open at X. Okay, now. But here's the situation. This question, a lot of folks would think this is tricky, but this is a real-world electrical diagnosis. Okay, high resistance at X will cause the voltage drop reading shown during cranking. Okay, but it will allow the fuel pump to run when we apply B plus to the prime connector using a jumper wire. And why is that? Because when I'm going to use my cursor here, when we go through this circuit with B plus and go to ground to run that pump normally, we're bypassing the high resistance there. We've already determined we can't have any problem here or here because the pump runs, okay? And the high resistance that is on the feed side of the normally operating circuit with the key, all right, doesn't have any effect when we use the jumper wire, okay? So we've just isolated. We've done a pinpoint diagnosis to a point in that circuit and made a diagnosis of that circuit. Correct answer is D. We've got to have high resistance at X to have all that information. The idea is, remember what I said, ASE test questions tell you in words what you do in the shop. You would have performed that voltage drop test. You would have performed that bypass of the prime connector with B plus yourself. We've done it for you. We've just given you the test results, how we did the test, and the information we received when doing those tests so that you can apply your knowledge to this skill, assess that information, and arrive at a conclusion based on the information provided, in this case an electrical schematic, okay? And you might have used an electrical schematic on the real car to make the same determination working on a car in the shop. Again, so it's kind of that one-to-one parallel, you know, a real-world situation that is as closely hands-on as we can get without, you know, testing you with your hands. We're testing you in words with what you do in the shop. Okay, so you know this question, you know the skill and the skill set that we're testing is using schematics when making diagnosis. It's critical to our job. We have to use schematics when we're doing all kinds of electrical diagnosis. We can't carry the stuff in the top of our head. It's also testing our knowledge of opens and resistance problems and how they affect proper circuit operation. Okay, it's also testing us on the use of a DMM when testing electrical circuits. You know, what do we know about DMM testing? Do we even know what that test is? Okay, you know, and then understanding, if we know what that test is, understanding the measured values that we receive. Okay, you know, this is the application of Ohm's law, ladies and gentlemen. This is a real-world application of, do you understand Ohm's law or not, and can you apply it to a diagnostic situation and arrive at a conclusion? Very critical skill. That all of us need to have if we're working on today's cars, because electrical's everywhere. So that's that pretty much brings me to a question break here. We're running pretty well on schedule, so at this juncture in the content, we're going to shift gears and get into a little bit of test taking tips. But do we have any questions out there, Dave, that we can address to the group?
Yes, John, we're getting quite a few questions about time on the CBT tests, and of course there's a lot of people that have, you know, experienced CBT for the first time and they're used to the old culture of paper pencil and are questioning whether, you know, why in the past you really weren't timed. I mean, I guess you were across all your tests, but now we have a per test time. So is there perhaps an explanation that you could give to that in terms of our new culture?
Sure. And again, this is a question, obviously, that since we moved over to all CBT, we've been answering quite a bit. You know, let me first say, and this isn't a politically correct ASE answer. This is really true. ASE tests were always timed. We told you could take up to 4 tests in one night when we were taking pencil and paper tests, okay? And you had 4 hours to take those tests. So essentially, you had an hour a test if you took 4 tests. And of course, you're saying, okay, well, John, but you know, I read a little more slowly. You know, I wanted to take my time. I want to be able to check, double check, triple check. So I only took 1 test or 2 tests. So I was able to actually use 2 hours. You're right. You were actually able to flex your time. That was the biggest hurdle that we encountered when moving over to all computer-based testing, was the time element, and that's why we spent a lot of time doing time studies and time analysis to try to come up with the amount of time that would benefit the majority of our technician test takers, and not disadvantage them by being rushed or having to not finish a test. We did exhaustive research. Anybody that's tested with us for a number of years knows that we actually dabbled in computer-based testing with our old testing partner, ACT, and that's where a lot of our data came from. Was we offered testing 4 times a year back then, twice pencil and paper in May and November, and then the off-cycle January and July we offered computer-based testing. It was twice the cost though. The interesting thing when we did that with American College Testing was, you, our technician customers, said, I love this platform, but it's twice the cost. Why? Why does it cost so much? So, you, our technician customers, have always told us you want testing more frequently, you want it more conveniently, not just May and November at 7 o'clock. You want it ad hoc. You want it at times that are convenient to you. You don't want to wait 3 weeks or a month for test results. You want test results right away. Oh, and the last criteria to all that was, and we don't want to pay anymore. Okay, well, somehow ASE was able to accomplish all those things by offering computer-based testing at pencil and paper prices. Okay, essentially what you were paying for pencil and paper testing, but it did come with some compromise. And the compromise wasn't cutting time. The compromise was finding places where we could make it workable for the masses overall. And our time studies were exhaustive. They really were, ladies and gentlemen, and I mean that sincerely. They were exhaustive in trying to come up with a modicum of time that would not disadvantage majority of technicians. And we've monitored those time studies in our first year of testing to make certain that we've hit the marks. The marks have been good, as I mentioned earlier. Overall, the ASE program, we've seen about an 85+% proficiency rate in technicians completing the test. And we actually can look at indices of technicians that actually rushed. Okay, so of those that completed, we can actually see that all of a sudden, the last 10 questions you started hurrying up because maybe you were spending a half a minute or a minute a question, and then the last 10 you spent 15 seconds. Okay, so we can actually even look at that, and that's the type of research we are doing on the data that we're receiving from you, taking the computer-based only test that we offer today, and looking and seeing if there's any adjustments we have to make in any of the times allotted to answer the battery of questions that we're giving you to earn certification. So that's, again, it's we're hitting the mark pretty high, but as I said before, 85% is great for 85% of the people, but what about the 15% that it's not? And trust me, ladies and gentlemen, we are as concerned with you as we are the good success that the 85% are achieving. We just need to find a way to do it and keep the costs, within reason of what what you folks are willing to pay for the service that we provide of certification testing. Dave, did you have anything else?
There was one other one, John, and we kind of touched on it earlier, and it was about scored items versus unscored items when you're doing statistical research. There seems to be some issue of of the time and how time is impacted by having those questions on there. So, and then one other related question was why are those why aren't they marked out as far as which are which?
Well, those are two good questions, and I'll quickly address it again because I've touched on it earlier. We need to vet those questions, and we need a national sample in order to receive good results so that we can keep the test current. You, our technician customers, demand that our tests stay current with technology. Without it, we'd be old school and we'd be testing carburetors. Okay, we have to continually introduce new material as it's introduced into our skill sets as technology advances. And so the only way we can do that fairly and equitably, in order to give you the best questions to earn your credential and make pass-fail decisions, we have to sample them on a national sample of technicians, and that's a national sample gives us technicians from varying levels of ability, because in a group of technicians that take a given test, there's going to be people that are very very smart and knowledgeable and top performing technicians, and there's going to be technicians in the middle of the road, and there's going to be technicians that are, that they're novices, maybe entry level. And so we get a good sample, and that's the data that we collect that give us the indications that the questions that our SMEs write are accurate and can be considered to be used to make pass-fail decisions in future tests. Again, as I mentioned, those additional 10 questions have been taken into consideration in our time study, okay? So they've been factored in. So it isn't that, hey, we've thrown 10 on top and reduced your time. The time has been based on the full number of questions, including the unscored questions. As a program, it's critical for us to continually introduce newly written questions into this process. And so when we did the time studies, those additional questions were included in those time analysis. Anything else, Dave, or ready to move on?
Let's go ahead and move on, John.
Okay, well, we're on the downhill. We'll finish up here with some test-taking tips. As I mentioned, I'd be remiss not to give you some things to consider at the test center. Again, we want to disseminate good information to you folks. What we want you to do is use the test task list as a benchmark for determining what you need to study before you test. If anybody didn't see my webinar from December 18th, you can actually sit down and view that. It's available on our website at ase.com. You can still go in. That webinar was actually based around how to use the information that ASE publishes to determine what you need to study before you come in and take an ASE test. You're the best judge of that, okay? But that task list that we publish for each test gives you the respective skills that we as technicians should know and understand when we're doing that work for a living. And that's what the questions in the test are going to be based on. So that information is critical. Okay, you want to find good study material. It's critical. You have to find good study material that teaches you at the level you need to be taught. If you don't know anything about Ohm's Law, you need an Electrical 101 class. Okay, it's the best way I can illustrate finding good study material. You need to find it at the level that you need skills reinforcement or education. Okay, so that's critical. That one book that you have may not do it for everything you need to know. Okay, so real critical to find it. Okay, you want to register early for testing, particularly with the computer-based testing. We have 4 2-month windows, but the longer you wait towards the close of that window, the less opportunity you're going to have of getting a day and time for an appointment that's convenient for you. Okay, so if you register early, you can get your calendar mapped out. Say, okay, I want to test, on February 12th at 3 o'clock. If you register early in January, chances are you're going to get that day and time. So register early. When you get your appointment confirmation, review that. Okay, the appointment confirmation, it recaps the test that you registered for. Okay, and it's sent to you either by email or you can get it from your MyASE account. Okay, but it's critical for you to review that and make sure before you drive to that test center, because that's one of the other compromises we made with computer-based testing. Some of the test centers in the more rural areas, we hear reports that some technicians are driving, 40, 50 miles to the test center. Before you go there, review your appointment confirmation. Make sure that all the tests that you're going to drive that distance to take are on that confirmation, because if they're not, you want to take care of it before you get in the car, okay? Because they can fix it up front, but when you get to the test center, it's too late, okay? You're going to have wasted a trip, or at least you won't be able to take all the tests that you thought you were going to take. A couple of little things. This is kind of stating the obvious. You want to be well rested, okay? When you're well rested, you're at the top of your game. I mean, we all know working in the shop, we maybe, after the Super Bowl Sunday, or, we actually have season tickets in our hometown. We went to a football game and we didn't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning. We're not operating at 100% the next day. It's critical, when we're thinking and using our cognitive skills to be well rested. We process better, we process information better, and we make less mistakes. So it's a proven fact. So to the extent you can, be well rested. Eat something light. Before you go to test, you don't want your stomach grumbling, but you also don't want to be weighed down with a steak and cheese. Okay, get something light just to keep your food, your calorie stores up, your energy stores up. It'll help you concentrate, and you'll that little thing right there can make a difference in your proficiency. Arrive early at the test center. If you've got an appointment at 10 o'clock, we always encourage technicians to get there at 9:30. Sometimes, in some cases, your time is real valuable. We recognize that. Time you're taking tests is time you're not in the shop making money. Okay, so if you get to the test center early because you can, chances are if they've got a seat open, they're going to seat you early. Okay, you can be in and out of there quicker than you thought. Your appointment might run from 10 to noon, okay, or 10 to 1. They might be able to seat you at 9:35, and you're out of there, a half hour, 40 minutes earlier. Okay, so and then you get back to the shop and maybe earn a few extra dollars that day. Okay, so arriving earlier will ensure that you get the seat that you paid for at the time you paid for it, but it might also help you in the long run based on the situation I just illustrated. If you have not taken our computer-based testing, I do want you to know that we do have security at the test center. In most cases, we do have two different types of test centers. We have a Prometric wholly owned test center, and we have satellite test centers. Okay, the satellite test centers work a little bit differently. If you don't get wanded and patted down, you're probably at a satellite test center. Okay, but if you're at a Prometric wholly owned test center, you will be put through security, and the security includes storing all your belongings in the locker. That includes your watch, your cell phone, keys, book bag, coat. Okay, change from your pocket. You can't have anything in your pockets. Okay, and then you're going to go into the test center. John, why the security? You didn't do this, with pencil and paper testing. Well, I'm gonna say this, and I said this in the last webinar. Everybody's seen the news. Okay, this is as much about your personal security as it is test security. Okay, and that's the absolute truth. Okay, and I'm going to leave it there because everybody's seen the news and you know what I'm talking about. We want to make sure that everybody is safe and secure when you're in our care taking a test. Okay, a couple more test taking tips. Make sure you bring a government-issued photo ID. Got to have that. The tests are timed. There's a complete list of testing times available on the ASE website. If you have any questions about how much time you're going to have on the clock taking a test, okay, go to our website and look at that time chart. Now, there's a difference between test time and appointment time. Okay, and I'm going to talk about this here in just a minute. Okay. You want to pace yourself again because you're on the clock. The clock starts as soon as you click here to begin and you start that test. So you click here to begin, then you do tell you who you are, your confidentiality agreement, and you state who you are. As soon as you click through that, you're on the clock and your clock's counting down. Okay. Taking a break, though, if you're taking multiple tests, and this is something, another really good tip I want to give you because this is something that the only way you'd know this is if you went to the ASE website and took our computer-based testing tutorial that we have available on our website, and I encourage you to do that, okay? But when to take a break is, let's say you're taking multiple tests and you've just gone through an hour's worth of testing for the engine repair test, okay, and you're getting ready to start the brakes test, okay? When you get to the screen that has a picture of a couple of technicians and it says A5 brakes, and down in the lower right-hand corner, it says, click here to begin. That's what we call the intro screen. Before you click here to begin, that's when you raise your hand and go take a break, okay? Because at that point, you're not on your test clock. You are on your appointment clock, okay? The difference is you have a modicum of time for taking each test within your appointment window, okay? But your appointment window has time built in it as a buffer for the time necessary to check in. The time that you have to take your tutorial, because your tutorial before your first test is 15 minutes. And so that's built into your appointment time because it'll be your test times plus a buffer of time, all right? So you can tap into that appointment time, but you have to know when to do it where it doesn't jeopardize you for test time. And when to do that is at that intro screen, okay? Again, go to the ASE website, look at the computer-based testing tutorial. It will illustrate this point exactly so that you understand exactly what to do because we do have a way for you to take a break between tests, go take a leg stretch, go take a restroom break, whatever you need to do. Just keep in mind that when you come back, you have to go back through security. They're going to check you, wand you again, make sure you didn't, you can't go to your locker, you can't read any materials, can't do anything. You go straight to the bathroom, come back, okay? So, and make it quick. You can't take forever because again you only have a modicum of time built into that appointment time that you can tap into to take that break. Okay. So as a last quick review, I encourage everyone to go on the ASE website at ase.com and take a look at the study guides for any test that you're going to take, whether it's an automobile test, collision repair, what have you. Everything that I've told you today helps you for anything you're trying to earn certification from ASE. Okay? The study guides contain the skill sets that we as technicians need to know and understand when trying to earn certification in any specialty area, whether it's automobile brakes or collision repair, damage analysis and estimating. Those skill sets tell us exactly what the questions in the test are going to relate to. And again, if you didn't see my December 18th webinar, it's a great webinar dealing with how to prepare for ASE testing, and it talks about all that in detail. Okay? The study guides that we offer, all that information, we only sell tests. Everything else is free of charge. We offer, the study information, the study guides that we publish. They don't tell you how to fix a car. They do tell you what's in the test. They're available free of charge 2 ways. You can get them from the ASE website, or you can contact ASE customer service and have a copy mailed to you on request. I wouldn't suggest that you go to the ASE website, download one, and print a whole study guide. Okay, they're about 60 pages. You'll burn up a ink cartridge and a whole ream of paper by the time you're done. So if you want the whole thing, call us. We'll send it to you free of charge. Okay, but again, use that test information in that study guide as a benchmark for your readiness for testing. Okay, and again, my previous webinar covers that, and it's still available on our website. One of the most important resources I can give you is the website at ase.com. We have test preparation resources like the webinar. We have tutorials for our computer-based testing. We have test-taking tips, tutorials. We got a whole lot of new stuff that we're really excited about offering you folks. We do want to help you be successful in your career. Not just sell you tests, and if you're not successful, well, you're on your own. We want to offer things like this webinar to help get you over the hump and to help you to earn the credential that you're striving to earn, because it means something to you and it's important to you for your career, because it's important to us. So with that, we'll go to questions. Anything, Dave, in closing? We're running a little over.
John, one of the questions that we got here was on, basically closing of the loop here in terms of preparation and things like that. And I think we want to just reiterate that ASE.com is where you're going to find our test prep guides there. We're going to have the content areas and task lists listed. We have the CVT test drive there also, so people can take a look at the test interface. Because there's been a lot of questions tonight here too about what do I do? Can I mark a question and come back to it later to save time? And absolutely, the flagging function is something we wanted to mention there real quick. Anything else you can add to that?
No. Ladies and gentlemen, anybody that asked a question about that user interface, the ASE test drive at ase.com explains that. My last webinar for December 18th, I go through that. I actually show you examples of how to use that. And the logic behind kind of the science that I showed you about evaluating questions tonight. There's a little bit of insight and science behind that, and my webinar from December 18th covers that. So if you got another hour of your time you spent with me tonight, go back in time and spend it with me December 18th again. I assure you, if you've enjoyed this webinar, you won't be disappointed with that one either. So anything else, Dave?
Just one other comment I want to make is that this session tonight was recorded. We're going to post it. There will be a link off of the ASE website. You should also receive some follow-up communication from us regarding this webinar, regardless of whether you attended it or for people that had registered for it and were not able to attend tonight. You should be getting some follow-up information. I know some people struggled with audio early on and a couple other issues, so don't fret. This was a recorded session, so the information will be available to you. And I guess the last thing we want to do is we just want to go ahead and we want to put out the polling question.
Yeah, exit poll. Out.
So that people vote on that. Got about 73% of the votes in so far as the attendees that are here right now. I'm not sure we'll get all of them because of, again, we got some people on mobile devices, so we'll probably not get all of that. So I think we're going to go ahead and we'll just close this poll out. And there you can kind of see what most of you responded. That is overwhelming majority where it's an ASE email announcement. So I just thought we'd share that with you real quick.
And on that note, keep an eye on future emails, ladies and gentlemen. These are, as we've mentioned, these are the first in a series. We will be doing these on a pretty semi-regular basis. So we're excited about offering more information to you as we have it to share on topics that are of interest to you. So keep an eye on your email. We'll be spreading the word about future activities like this.
One last comment I just want to make to our audience tonight is, again, thank you for attending. The other thing is we had an overwhelming number of questions come in tonight, and when John asked for questions or in some of the comments that I made, we tried to group those together, and I realized that some of you asked questions tonight that we couldn't get to. So what we're going to do is offline, we'll go through the chat logs, and then we'll follow up with you on some of these unresolved issues. But thanks again for attending, everybody. As John said, look forward to our next webinar. We look forward to doing these on a regular basis, and it seems like at least that that's been appreciated on your end to learn a little bit more about ASE and the certification process. Thanks again for attending, and we'll see you soon.
Good night, everyone.